Welcome to the Mark Edge Show, and you can find out more at markedge.org. Today I have with me, well, one of my good friends, Stephan Kinsella. You're here with us today, and I guess the title you're going to use is Fellow at the Mises Institute today?
It's a little bit dated reference, but
okay. Then perhaps not. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about, is that on April 1st, a day I believe nothing that I read, out came a document, I guess, a memo from the Mises Institute that said that Hans Hermann Hoppe, I mean, a name that is, at this point, among living libertarian academics, the pinnacle. I mean, there's probably a handful of people that sit within this realm, and I can't think of too many names off the top of my head, but the very tip of sort of important libertarian academics, Hans Hermann Hoppe.
Yeah, that's true.
To the point now that we use terminology like Hoppean. Hoppean, great. And, Hans doesn't do a lot of interviews. I have never done one with him, but I can get and to explain it all to me. And you were the first person I reached out to in order to understand this memo, which I dismissed out of hand completely. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, this is obvious April Fool's tomfoolery. And I'm not going to pay any attention to it. Didn't read it, didn't look at it, like, this is ridiculous. Was it ridiculous?
I mean, one reason I hate April Fools, I've hated it for a long time. Even in my note, I said, this is not April Fools. People don't know whether to believe you or not. But no, it just happened to come out that day. I mean, I think it's a significant event. It's as we know, the future's uncertain and the world always changes and things always change. And this is another thing that's changed in the libertarian Austrian economics firmament. It's pretty self-evident what happened because we were pretty clear about it online. I am writing an article now with a little bit more detail about my own view on what happened and my own experience with the Mises Institute. But if you like, I can just kind of summarize what happened, and people that want to read further can do that.
That's what I'd like. You know how I hate reading.
So I have been myself. I'm a retired patent lawyer and a libertarian writer, and I've been associated closely with the Mises Institute since 1994. And with Hoppe and with these guys ever since then. And Hans Hoppe came to the U.S. in 1985 to study under Murray Rothbard, and he did so for 10 years, the last 10 years of Murray's life, until his death in 1995. And so in my own case, since 1995, I've been affiliated with the Mises Institute, primarily because of Hoppe and the work that they do promoting liberty and sound economics and Austrian economics and Rothbardian theory, basically. Hans was a senior fellow there, senior distinguished fellow, the only one they've ever made that way. He was, their key intellectual figure, I would say. When Jeff Tucker was there and he became influenced by my IP ideas in the early 2000s, and he started opening up the Mises Institute's publications with free PDFs and free material, which sort of made them notable for a good 10 or 15 years. That was in a time when it was crucial. That was like the main repository of our kind of radical, principled Austrian economic free market ideas. I mean, to this day, people still remember how great Mises Institute was, Mises.org was.
I do. I considered Mises Institute to be this epicenter of these ideas, and I don't have any reference for not thinking that, and that's why when I saw this memo, I can't say I have my fingers on the pulse of what's going on there in Auburn, but the idea that Hans Hermann Hoppe, the senior's distinguished fellow, would throw in the towel in the Mises Institute? What?
Well, and I'll explain what happened. So, but the long summary view is so, and I do think Mises is still important. But I think it was crucially important. It was sort of the successor to laissez-faire books in a way. If you remember, before the internet age, laissez-faire books was the main way all of us learned. Back when libertarians still read, and actually were somewhat literate, not ruined by TikTok and whatever they do now. all these Ron Paul guys who were more radical, strangely, than the old generation of more straight-laced minarchist libertarians, but they were a little bit more principled and literate. But anyway, that's kind of the background. After laissez-faire books and Mises.org became a very important repository of information, I think that need has, of course, diminished now. There's so many other sites that have information, so that need has gone down, but there's still a strong repository of those ideas. Not the only one anymore, which is good. But basically, when Jeff Tucker was there, Doug French was appointed to be the first non-Lew Rockwell president in, I think, 2009, if I'm remembering right. And he and Jeff had a good collaboration. They were doing all kinds of things, including the book publishing and the book stuff like that. And there were some tensions behind the scenes, which came to a head when Tucker ended up leaving, if I recall, in late 2011, because the leadership there was not happy with the book publishing, which was the main thing that everyone else likes Mises about. And then Doug French left soon after for similar reasons. And that's more their story to tell, but I will go into it a little bit in the article that I'm writing. In the meantime, I was given all these awards for my IP work. I was asked to become a senior fellow myself in 2009.
To toot that horn, if I could, for a second, essentially, when anybody in the liber sphere has a question about intellectual property, for better or for worse, they call Stephan Kinsella, right? I mean, it's not like that's the depth of your theories or anything like that. You look at lots of other things, but for some reason, it's just the branding, and that's what you got.
Yeah, I'm known for that because I figured it out early on and right at the right time when the internet, digital information age made that issue important. And I happen to be an IP lawyer and a libertarian writer, so I was the one who could specialize in that. And so I've become known for that. And it had some influence in Tucker and the open publishing policy. And I thought everyone on Mises was on board with it. Lew Rockwell was giving me praises behind the scenes. They asked me to be a senior fellow, all that stuff. That was 2009. After Tucker and French left in 2013, I think David Gordon always had some qualms about the way I presented the case because I kind of criticized Rothbard, who didn't quite get the issue right. I mean, he was very good, but he messed it up a little bit. And so I was figuring this out, finding ways to present it. And anyway, in 2013, there was this oral history project they were doing where they would collect memories of people like Rothbard and others to preserve it, which was great. They just announced in 2013 this podcast discussion with Joe Salerno, their academic vice president, who was the guy who asked me to be a Mises fellow, and Lew Rockwell, who had praised my work and had published me and put me on his podcast for IP and was behind the open publishing. Now, at the time, I didn't really know why Tucker had left and French had left, really. And then David Gordon. And in the beginning of this 1 hour, 2 hour discussion of Rothbard, they just mentioned my IP work, and David Gordon was criticizing it, saying it wasn't a big revolution, and I kind of got some stuff wrong, and I wasn't good on Locke. And I was a little bit dismayed by what had happened. Like, why would they, in 2013, attack me, basically, in a public podcast when I'm one of their senior fellows? And this just made no sense to me. So I published it on Facebook. I just said, hey, you might want to take a look at this podcast between Salerno, Rockwell, and Gordon. And I just summarized what they said. I didn't say anything else. And Peter Klein, who at the time was the acting chairman or the acting executive president or something for a couple years because Doug French had left, he called me. We were friends. And he said, do you think it's appropriate for a senior fellow of Mises to criticize, the leadership? And I was thinking, do you think it's appropriate for them to criticize one of their fellows for work they've given me awards for? And I said, no, you're right. I quit. I resigned. I don't put up with bullshit like that because I'm independent. I don't need to. I never have. I've never taken offers to work in academia or in think tank world where someone can control my ideas like Cato or Mises. I'm just not going to do it. And I just said, no, you're right. So I quit in 2013. Now, I just let it go because I have my life to live. And I should have known then something was wrong because
when I think about it, I guess I sort of look at as a Mises fellow as this kind of title of Marine, right? Like, once a Mises fellow, always a Mises fellow.
Well, that's Hans's point is like, it's weird that they would revoke his status, even though he criticized them, which we'll get to. But anyway, and so, I just moved on. But And then they took down that podcast and they just erased it. I thought they would take out the bad 5 minutes and put it back up, but they never did. But someone found it recently in the archive, so I have it. So it may be put back online soon because it's valuable to keep it because of the history about Rothbard. In any case, they went on, but that was one of the early signs that I saw that there was something there that didn't jive with what I had perceived to be their mission. Because in 1995, when Rothbard died, Hans Hoppe got appointed to be the successor editor to the Journal of Libertarian Studies, which made sense. And he was the editor for 10 years. And then in 2005, around the time when all this stuff happened, right before Tucker and French had left, he got basically fired from his position as editor of the JLS for no good reason except that he was a little bit behind on some of the issues. And they put Roderick Long in charge briefly, and he turned it leftward, and he didn't do a good job editing it, and so it fell apart. So in 2009, the JLS had basically, after they fired Hans, they had disappeared. And so I was brainstorming with Tucker one night. I said, we need to have the JLS, but I don't have any authority to revive it. So I said, let me start my own journal. So I started the Libertarian Papers Journal in 2009 as a sort of substitute for the JLS. And I ran that for 10 years, and we kind of acted as a substitute. And in 2018, I had kind of gotten back in good graces with the Mises Institute, although not a fellow anymore. And they said, hey, we're going to revive the JLS. And I said, then I can stop publishing the Libertarian Papers, and I can turn over my articles to you that are in the pipeline. And so I turned it over to them. And I tried to maintain good terms with them even after I resigned from, because I still believe in their mission, and I still do, by the way. I still hope the best for them. In any case, so then Jeff Deist became president in 2009, and he did a great job in my view. He's another friend, like Doug French is a friend. He was great. I think he was in there about 10 years, and then tensions between him and the staff there made him have to resign. And then they hired Tom DiLorenzo, another good friend, who's a wonderful guy. He recently retired. And all three of these guys gave up their outside life and they moved to Auburn, Alabama for this position. And they all got the rug pulled out from under them. And then Tom was terminated about a year and a half ago, about a year and a half into his term as well. And at that point in time, Hans and Guido Hülsmann, who's a senior fellow at Mises, they sent a private memo to the board saying something's wrong because you guys have lost 3 good guys in a row. And their opinion was, which they outlined in their memo, which was private until recently, was that the way the board was structured, there was an academic vice president, Joe Salerno, who was an employee reporting to the president, but he was also on the board. So they thought that led to some kind of inability of the president to really govern the way they wanted to govern because they couldn't really give orders to the guy who was under them. It was something like that, right?
That makes sense.
Well, they were ignored. Hans felt the need to come out to criticize all the people praising Javier Milei because he had claimed Rothbard and Hoppe as some of his inspirations. So Hans felt that he ought to set the record straight and say, I don't endorse him because I don't know if I trust what he's going to do. He's a politician, and he's probably better than the previous alternatives, but don't put too much faith in politicians, etc. Now, that upset a lot of Milei supporters who are the rah-rah Ron Paul types, and they want you to not admit the flaws of their political candidate because they want to get a victory or whatever. So anyway, in this backdrop, he was upset also about Milei supporting the war by Israel against Palestinians and so on. Against this backdrop, recently, earlier this year at the Austrian Economic Research Conference in the spring, the distinguished speaker was Jesus Huerta de Soto, and he is a big Milei supporter, and so in his speech, he praised Milei. And Hans had this kind of snide blog post on his site saying that it's kind of pathetic that when he did that, he got applause instead of boos. Right? So that was one of the preceding events. Oh, and then Hans and I published in March a book celebrating Rothbard because it was his 100th birthday. And Hans submitted his introduction to the book to Mises to offer it to them to publish it online because they hadn't done a lot to celebrate Rothbard's 100th birthday. And they turned him down they didn't want to publish that piece.
Yeah, this is very strange to me because if anybody's going to write a book about Rothbard and you're going to put, the title credits for that, the author credit for that, you want that person to be Hans Hermann Hoppe.
Right.
I mean, there's a small handful of people, and I think Hoppe's name is number 1 or 2 of those people. Like, Walter Block might have a claim.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
no.
Who else?
I mean, there's a couple others that are Rothbardians and well known, but Hans is the obvious one, and he has his own institute, the Property and Freedom Society, which, by the way, when he was terminated in 2005 as editor of the JLS, I think he sensed something was wrong, so he formed the very next year in 2006 the Property Freedom Society in Bodrum, so he would have his own institute that he controlled, and he wasn't at the mercy of anyone else. That was very prescient and smart, I believe. And so we published that book under the auspices of the PFS. In any case, when they rejected an article about Rothbard in the year of his 100th birthday from a book about Rothbard, from the senior distinguished fellow at Mises by his main intellectual representative, it was odd that they didn't want to publish that piece. So he decided to write his piece called Quo Vadis, and he explained what he thinks is going wrong with Mises, and he published in there his memo he had written earlier with Guido Hülsmann. And so in that piece, he criticized them for their board structure and for the problems, and then they terminated his distinguished fellowship a week or so later, which is not surprising, to be honest. So that's a summary of what happened and where we are.
Well, again, I would say, best to the Mises Institute and best to Hoppe. I'm just stunned by all of this. I really didn't think this was going to happen. I didn't think it was even true. So bizarre. I will say I like Milei, not because I trust politicians, but because he gives the best lip service to libertarianism of any politician I've ever heard. And I'm sure trying to take a highly socialist government where you are one influencer in that government to a more libertarian destination is very difficult.
Yes.
And that's about all I got.
Yes, and if outsiders were carping just about that, look, libertarians can disagree on that issue, I think. Look, I think the concern for the people concerned about it, like Tom DiLorenzo and Hans, is that he's going to fail, partly because it's inevitable he's going to fail, which is not his fault, but also because he's really not what he pretends to be, completely. And when he fails, it's going to be blamed upon libertarianism. So that's the concern. And also, he came out in favor of Israel's war, and so he sort of seems like a neocon and a warmonger. Now, you could defend him. You could say he has no choice. He's the small guy in South America. He's got to kiss ass to the U.S. or whatever. Okay, those are all excuses. I don't know. But anyway, you can see why some people are upset about it. So you got a right to be upset about it, and that's the benefits of freedom of association. Go your own way. But that's what happened in that respect.
Well, I do appreciate it. When's the book coming out?
So the digital book came out on Rothbard's birthday. It's available online for free right now. The hard version is almost at press right now. So we will definitely have it out by the PFS meeting in September. But my hope is it'll be out in June, because there is a Rothbard celebration in Portugal, in Porto, Spain, which Hans Hoppe and I are both going to, organized by several groups there. And at that meeting, they're going to release the Portuguese translation of my book, my 2023 book, which is right there.
What's the name of it?
This is my main book, which has my IP, Legal Foundations of a Free Society.
Got it.
So this has my IP views and my other libertarian writings. So they're releasing that, and they're also going to have a big Rothbard celebration. So I'm hoping to bring my book there then. And look, I wish the Mises Institute well. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? I think this is partly a symptom of Lew Rockwell's declining health, which Hans mentioned in his article. And as these think tanks and institutions get older and they have a lot of money, then there are battles for, not battles for power, but just basically you have to decide what to do going forward. And I think we're in a transition phase right now, and we'll see what happens. But unfortunately, the last three presidents in a row, who've all been wonderful people and great, didn't last. And there's just something wrong when that happens, and that needs to be righted somehow, in my view.
So tell me, what is the website that I would go to get tickets to the Porto, Portugal event, find the digital book, and await the hardcover book? Where can I go to find out more?
So for the book, I would go to propertyandfreedom.org, and there's a link at the top with our books, and the book is linked there. The digital version is online now, and as soon as it's available for purchase, that will be there. I don't think the website is up yet for the Porto event. They're working on it. It's almost up, but I will put that on the PFS site as well, and on my site. StephanKinsella.com has all of my writing.
And spell Stephan Kinsella isn't the easiest spell in the world, please.
Stephan with an A. Stephan Kinsella.com is my
it's
site.
Probably best just to use a search engine for this particular one.
Yeah, search for radical, bald, libertarian white guy. I don't know.
How big do you think the event's going to be?
I don't know. Initially, it was going to be a tiny event, but I was talking to Manuel Ogondo, who runs it, and he came to the PFS last year, and we became friends, and he was mentioning he was going to have this event in June in Portugal, and he said, we're going to release a translation of your book. He goes, man, I wish you could be there. And I said, well, I could be. He said, really? I said, yeah. And he said, well, man, it'd be great if we could get Hans there. And I said, well, if you invite him and you make the right offer, maybe he'll come. And so now I think it's going to be a kind of a bigger deal. But I think it will be advertised pretty soon on his site. So just go to propertyandfreedom.org, and I will blog about it there as soon as we have details.
Propertyandfreedom.org.
Yep.
Remind me one more time the dates.
I think it's June 27th is with the dates of this thing. And now it's a Portuguese event, so I think it's going to be primarily a Portuguese language event.
Interesting.
But I think they're going to have translations and things like that. So it should be a very nice event. I mean, it's called for in this year of Rothbard to have some celebration and commemoration of his thought and his influence in our movement and the liberty movement in general.
Yeah, certainly the most recent in the giants of libertarianism. And it's kind of one of those things where, like the good ideas are kind of all taken. You got lucky because you were a IP lawyer, right? And then, you refined the IP stance to the point that I'd say it's pretty well honed. Your stance, I mean, mine's just what I remember of talking to you.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is there's less low-hanging fruit now. I mean, the IP was low-hanging fruit. There's still some things left to be done. Our theory is not complete by any means, but Rothbard is a really good foundation for the way to make progress, building on his ideas with Mises too, and with Hoppe's extensions, and with that of others, a lot of other people. So that's the intellectual side of things. There's a whole movement out there of different approaches to understanding and advancing liberty in our own lives and for the rest of the world and for the future, which is why I saw you in Prague last, I believe, and I may see you in, will I see you in Prospera in this year at the Free Cities Conference?
Absolutely. I'm going to be there doing probably a little bit of MC work. They always put me up on the stage because I like it. And
you were good at it in Prague. You were great.
Yeah, I kept my pants on the whole time.
I know you did. That disappointed some of us, but
Indeed. It's always a party when Mark's had a little wine, right? StephanKinsella.com, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark.
I have recently started working with Salt Lending, and I think they're a great organization. What they allow you to do is access the value contained within your cryptocurrency without having to sell it. You take a collateralized loan, and the rate is competitive. It depends on, how long do you take the loan for, how much is the loan for, what's the loan to value, how much cryptocurrency you put in, those kind of things. And your loan is not taxed. So this is kind of the loophole that billionaires use in order to not pay tax on their money. They'll take, a stock or some kind of article of value, in this case, cryptocurrency. They'll get a low interest loan on it, and then they will use that money. And then, of course, it appreciates in value, and then as a result, you basically have a no tax situation. It's pretty cool. So if you're interested in accessing the value inside your cryptocurrency, and you have cryptocurrency, just send me an email at salt@markedge.org. salt@markedge.org.